Navigating the combination is about the real decisions in combination product development, the trade-offs, the judgment calls, and the things that don't fit neatly into a guidance document.
Each episode, we sit down with leaders from across drug delivery to talk through what's actually changing and the strategic challenges of bringing a drug device combination product to market.
Our team has touched more combination products than we can count. From early strategy through launch and post-market, we've seen what works, what doesn't, and what keeps people up at night.
We're former pharma, former device, and former FDA. And now we're bringing the people we've worked with onto the show.
This is what we've learned. Let's help you do it right the first time. Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode of Navigating the Combination. I'm Parth Kothari.
And I'm Jonathan Amaya-Hodges. We're both from Suttons Creek. And today we had a really great conversation with Nathan Kast from Stevanato. We touched on a few different topics, such as the drug device combination product development process from small pharma, biotech perspective, things that can go wrong in programs and ways to really prevent that beforehand, what those types of companies might get wrong about device partners, how they can change their perception there, some of the more recent economic constraints and struggles that pharma might be under and how that translates to their device partners, and really the global supply chain and how that's changing in today's day and time. And then we heard some good personal anecdotes from him about his good career.
Hey Nathan, great to have you on today. How are you doing?
It's good to be here, Parth. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Good. And if you haven't met, Jonathan Amaya-Hodges is a fellow colleague here. Jonathan, you want to say hi?
Nathan, nice to be in touch with you and look forward to our conversation here.
Great to see you, Jonathan. Thanks for joining. Thanks for having me on.
So before we get started, Nathan, do you want to give a little bit of an overview of your combination product journey so far?
Sure. So I've been in the industry for a number of years. Started off with some work at SHL, then moved over into Becton Dickinson, and now at Stevanato Group. Early on in my career, I was a program manager, working with pharmaceutical companies to design auto-injectors, both in terms of a platform device that we had at SHL, and then also working with pharma to develop inputs for novel type injectors, specifically for specific formulations. And then I moved into business development at SHL, and then moved over into Becton Dickinson, eventually leading a global team of folks for drug delivery systems, and then moved to Stevanato Group, where I'm overseeing corporate key accounts. So that's my journey, and 1,000 details in between.
No. And for everyone, just as a disclosure, Nathan and I did work together on a pen injector and wearable injector program in the past. So you may hear a little bit of that come out as we're talking. With that, Nathan, when we met, you had mentioned to me that you came into combination products from a little bit of a medical device, regenerative medicine standpoint. Can you talk to us a little bit about just how you ended up in the combo product space and, what maybe surprised you the most about your transition into it?
Yeah, pure accident. I had no idea what I was doing or what I was getting into. I met somebody during my MBA who introduced me into a particular role for which they were looking at the time, this company, SHL. And I really had no combination product experience at all, but I was given an opportunity to start as a program manager. Frankly, I had no business being there, but they really needed people. And I worked really hard, and I spent a lot of time trying to learn the systems. So that was really my interest. That's purely by accident. I think the power of networking and being in the right place at the right time and just showing up. And started there. Made some big mistakes early on in my career, technically, and with DHFs, for example. Had some amazing mentors who trained me through that and saw that as opportunities to grow. And that's how ultimately how I got into it. Yeah. In terms of the differences, no, sorry, Parth, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
Yeah, differences are interesting. The regenerative medicine space that I was in, I was working at a university developing some technologies, but ultimately that was intended for a hospital physician-based market. So more not direct to consumer, but direct to hospital, direct physician, direct surgeon. And certainly there's significant differences on the commercial sides for sure, and capacity and scale planning when you're working in that space versus, let's say, business to business supplier partner to pharma. So that was a big learning curve as well.
Yeah, you mentioned, right, as you were talking, how mentorship played a big part in your career. Do you want to expand a little bit on that and what good mentorship might look like?
Yeah. I mean, I've been very fortunate to have great mentors in my career, both in terms of the technical side of things as well as business uh, professional development. I don't know that it's so much what a good mentor looks like as what a good mentee looks like. I think a good mentee is somebody who is open to learning, open to admitting mistakes, open to growth, a humble approach to your work. And I think that's true for me now as it ever was. I think the key here is to be a good mentee, and the mentors will come along because there will be
Yeah.
people who are recognize that and see as an opportunity that their time and their efforts won't be wasted. We're
Yeah.
dealing with very busy people.
That's,
Good.
that's,
Good.
Not that I'm a perfect mentee. That's not my point. I'm trying to
Everybody's
share.
everything's about learning and improving, and that's maybe what I'll spin the next question to kind of go towards is, smaller pharma biotech companies often don't understand drug device combination product development and integration until it becomes an issue. What have you seen that those types of companies usually miss and then have to learn the hard way? What should they be doing maybe to learn earlier and prevent the problems?
Yeah, that's a good question, Jonathan. I'd say I've seen a pretty significant shift over the last decade and a half or so in the general maturity of pharma, understanding the criticality of drug delivery systems, containment systems, and the infrastructure around that, both in terms of the technical side of that reliability, but also the scalable commercial side. I wouldn't say that that's completely consistent across the industry, though. I think there's some serious opportunities, some real opportunities there for us to, as an industry, to grow there. The two buckets that I would put those sort of create categories would be pharma, who were early on in adapting to drug delivery systems, containment systems, and have developed the internal infrastructure, let's say, technical resources in terms of human experience and tribal knowledge, so they've matured in that way. And then there's small pharma or medium pharma whose real focus is on pharmaceutical development. We're talking PhD level drug development. That's their focus. And clinical packaging or commercial packaging is still considered just that. It's packaging. It's not a drug containment solution. It's not a delivery system. It's a parallel development or later development. So to your question around what can we learn about that and where are there some gaps, I think seeing drug containment and drug delivery systems as an integral part of the ecosystem that needs to be built around a drug asset is, I think, where, again, large pharma, mature pharma who've been there for a while understand that, have developed those technical capabilities, and then maybe pharma who are focused more on drug development and getting speed to market of that molecule, and that's their incentive. That's where they're incentivized. So I don't necessarily know that it's rational behavior depending on where you're where you're looking at it. If you're a group of guys or folks developing a pharmaceutical asset, it's rational to think we need to get this molecule to market, and that's the focus of our energies and technical expertise. I think it is on all of us in the industry who've been around a while and who act as suppliers and partners or consultants to these groups to look out for that and provide solutions to those groups and to help them look around the corners and say to them, it's not just the drug. You have to think very early on about drug glass interaction. You have to think about glass to device interaction if that's the path we're choosing. They have to think about regional versus global scalability of where they're going to manufacture it. What does that supply chain look like? So I think there's some areas that we, as in this industry been for a while, can help our partners succeed and really provide get molecules and therapies to market faster and more efficiently for patients, which is the ultimate goal, at least mine. Probably you'll share that as well.
Absolutely.
yeah.
I guess to take a little bit different angle on that, maybe we talked about speed to market, and that's usually the angle that those types of companies come from. Most companies, in fact, but something that also comes up is cost. What do you think about those that say, well, let's kick the can down the road so we don't have to spend that money right now, or let's go with the cheapest option that's on the table? on the device constituent part side. What types of issues does that usually lead people into, and what thoughts do you have there?
That's a good question. I think it's the ever-present question as we just, as we talk to our partners every day, and I'm sure you all share this as well. Human nature is to only typically look at the costs or risks right in front of you. And the further down or the further away in time those risks lie, we see them as reduced significantly, exponentially, maybe. Showing our pharma partners, thinking about it as a TCO assessment or total cost of ownership over time, outlining the risks of not thinking about integration and these types of questions early may save costs in the short term, but it's probably likely that eventually they may experience higher costs and risks and slowdowns in their program. Now, if you're a VC funded or investment funded type of pharma company, that may be a reasonable risk because you simply don't have the cash to pay for these things. But I think it's on all of us again to at least outline what those costs and those risks trade-offs are for pharma. So I think again, the groups who have been in this space for a while, developing combination products of drug, glass device systems, understand and have a pretty sophisticated understanding of those risks and those benefits. And I do think there's groups like Suttons Creek, for example, your group provide an invaluable opportunity to at least help these groups assess what those trade-offs are. Maybe they select it, maybe they don't, maybe there's money, maybe there isn't, but at least everybody has a better understanding of the decisions making, and the inputs to those decisions are a little bit more sophisticated or mature than otherwise.
Yeah,
you bring up a good point, right? Similar to you and your experiences where you've been a device partner for years for different pharma clients, Suttons Creek is doing a very similar thing. Let me ask you this, from your perspective, when you're working with these different pharma companies, what's something that you see consistently that they misunderstand about how that supplier works, right? In terms of what actually works, what doesn't work?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think pharma is really operating under asymmetric risk, right? They're looking at clinical risks, regulatory exposure, high asset value concentration, and again, their behavior is absolutely rational in that circumstance. They're pushing the risk downstream. They're preserving that flexibility. They're managing that cost very early. But what I would say is that the struggle is not necessarily that large pharma or small pharma don't understand that value or don't understand the struggles that pharma partners groups like ours or groups like mine are dealing with. Think that it's an incentivized behavior to do some of the things that they're doing. What to me that true partnership looks like is a transparent discussion between the two groups on pharma companies understanding the level of engagement that they want with our device or consulting partners or drug containment partners, understanding the flexibility and the economic decisions that groups like yours, groups like ours have to make based on inputs from pharma, because we're often in the same situation. There's a degree of flexibility we have, but it's limited by the therapy, the volumes, and in some instances, the resources available. I think getting maybe a follow-on point to this is, if we're talking about misunderstandings between the two groups, how do we increase that level of communication and transparency between the two? And I think it really comes down to us understanding pharma's constraints, their needs and desires, and pharma also having an understanding of the risk trade-offs that suppliers and partners like you, like me, have to make in trying to meet those needs. And there's a pretty clear set of, general topics that can be run through in a matter of days or weeks that outline the capacity, the scale, the flexibility, the regionality of the manufacturing sites, for example, the resource constraints that you all have in terms of personnel. How much time do you need to plan for a very large project? Do you need to hire other consultants in, et cetera?
Yeah. Let me ask this question for you. Just it kind of resonates a little bit in terms of what you're saying, right? In terms of being ready internally to be able to help externally. as you're engaging with different clients, different partners, whatever that might look like, how do you help reset the expectations when someone comes in and they have these assumptions that don't actually match the reality of the situation?
Well, again, I think, I've seen less and less of that, which is amazing. I love that
Yeah.
about this space as we have continued to mature and evolve. And I'm sure you both have experienced that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really cool to see the industry as a whole understanding the concept that glass and devices or whatever is not just packaging. It is truly should be an integrated system. Again, there's pockets of
Yeah.
maybe newer people who are not aware of that, but generally the market's
Sure.
evolving well. But should that happen, and there's always instances where that happened in terms of misaligned expectations, to me, it's getting to the core of that understanding. There is a need there that pharma has, and that's why they're asking for that. And maybe they're not showing, maybe the assumptions that they're making, they heard from somebody else, or they had a different experience somewhere else, or they came from a different industry and that's being transferred over into this space. And so it's clarifying exactly what the expectation is. Why is that expectation held? What problem are they trying to solve? And how do we work around that need to solve it, maybe in not the way that they think they need to be solved, but maybe there's another answer. There typically is. I had a boss of mine tell me, maybe he listens to this podcast or not. He'll know who he is when he hears this. His statement is always say no by saying yes, which is maybe that's not the exact solution we can provide to you, but help me understand your problem and we will find a solution to that problem some way. So
yeah, very, very much so, like the yes and or the yes, but it's going to take this, right? Conversation. Yeah, exactly.
What have you all found? I mean, you're in a different space now, Parth. You've moved over from being largely technical, deep in the details of really sophisticated device development. How are you dealing with that now in a different space?
Yeah. Oh, great question. What I'll say is very similar to, what I might say to anyone in terms of it's just about communication, right? It's about making sure you say, hey, this is what we're able to do. This is what we're capable of doing. And then being able to explain, hey, these additional things, whether or not you need them, how they might impact what the next steps look like, and kind of tailoring it to be able to meet as much as you can. Maybe you're not 100% there, but even 90% gets you pretty far along. And outside of that, it's also just working with Suttons Creek is part of a larger entity, right? And so working with our sister companies within our organization to be able to potentially pull in support and expertise to hopefully support the remaining 10% of what might be there. Jonathan, what do you think? Do you agree?
It's a good question. I think to add on to that, something that we at Suttons Creek really pride ourselves on doing, and I know many folks in this industry do it as well, is really trying to educate as we go forward, not just say, well, here's the solution, take it or leave it, right? It's how did we get here? What underlies the process? And how can we help you, the client, the customer, the pharma developer, et cetera, understand what this is all about, why we do it, what underpins it, regulatory wise, risk management, development, design controls, that kind of thing. And that I think can help bridge the gap, as you were saying, really help them understand why the initial question they asked might not have been the ideal question. Instead, they can come to the realization of what they need, hopefully by themselves.
I think that's great. And frankly, I love to do that in my conversations with pharma on my side as well too. There's a lot about drug development and clinical studies. There's a million nuances there. I love to learn about those things and understand why certain things happen and why certain requests are made, because sometimes something will come out of left field and why, what's going on there, but digging in there into understanding that. And I think that's how we all grow in this space and learn more. And then we can serve our customers better, because if they're dealing with it, someone else is probably dealing with the same thing. There's constantly evolving regulations, requirements, geopolitical situations, and a lot of decisions are made with these incredible number of factors, and understanding how pharma balances all those different, let's say, challenges is really interesting, and how they ultimately come to the decisions they come with. And I'm sure it's not a clean, smooth, efficient process always, but somehow we're still running a drug device industry, right? Still running.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's similar to that book, right? Start with Why by Simon Sinek, right? Understanding the crux behind anything helps you better act and react and reach a better endpoint at the end of the day.
Yeah, and it's so true. My mom told me when I was 5 years old, she was about to throw me out of the window because as a 5-year-old, Nathan was never satisfied with whatever high level answer about why the sky was blue answer my parents would give me. Well, why? And I would just continue for hours. So I think I've maintained a bit of that in my adulthood.
Curiosity. Yeah, love it.
Good, good. I think pulling on a thread that you had mentioned in your response at one point and earlier when I was mentioning cost, but taking it from a little bit different perspective. I think we've seen pharma get more cost pressure now from the price side, whether it be biosimilar competition, other things there, government pressure, now including the US as well as ex-US countries that do more negotiation, that kind of thing. How does that find its way now into the device space for delivering those drugs?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I'm certainly no economics expert. I'd say maybe what I've observed, and I'll just share that and maybe some
Yeah.
inferences I could take from that. I think we have a constant downward pricing pressure on drug therapies in general from all the things you just mentioned. We're also seeing, because of some of those pressures, a focus on regionalization of supply chain. I think with COVID really showed the fragility of the supply chain network in general, not just pharma, but really globally for almost any product in the world. But pharma turns to be a little bit more critical just because of the nature of what we do, which is life-saving, life-enhancing therapies and for patients in need. So at the same time that there's these pricing pressures, I think there's cost increases as well in their supply chain and their manufacturing networks for this continued push towards nearshoring, onshoring or nearshoring, regionalization of the structures, supply chain structures. So I think what we're seeing pharma is not necessarily make a pure trade-off between cost decreases or price decreases and cost increases from this regionalization. I think what we're seeing is a strategic selection of assets or drugs in their portfolios that make sense to regionalize. Some assets are okay at a centralized core producing the volume that they need and shipping it. Just depends on the economic structure. So how does that play into things like drug containment solutions and drug delivery devices? And I think, again, as a generality, strategic decisions are being made with regards to network price reductions, if possible, to balance out the cost increases from some regionalization of some assets that need to happen. What does that look like in the future? I think we'll see. Again, it depends on the asset and the therapy. I think generally, again, going back 15 years, I think we've all been in the space long enough. Devices were seen as a differentiating factor for certain therapies, right? That was the differentiation. Now, I think the shift to at-home care is accelerating. It's almost what do we call it? Table stakes for some of these therapies. So they have to have a drug delivery system in some way. It can't just be a vial. It needs to be a PFS and a safety syringe type of device, or an actual drug delivery device. And so I think these products, as the cost pressures rise and price decrease pressure rises, we're seeing standardization requests for drug containment solutions and drug delivery systems. I don't think it's a differentiating factor as much today as it was 15 years ago. So I think that helps a lot with the drug, because the cost of the therapies, if you have a standardized platform, if you have a standardized drug containment solution, it can help drive efficiencies at scale, both in terms of regional structures and global supply chain structures. Does that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah. I think that's a really good point about the increasing onshoring, nearshoring, regionalization, if you will, from a really what we saw was a centralized model. But and I agree with your point that the device element is now kind of table stakes. You got to have it, otherwise you're going to be behind, versus using it as a differentiator to be ahead.
Yeah, I think that assessment has changed a bit now from uniqueness and differentiation to reliability, scaling, your ability to scale, your ability to manufacture in a more geopolitically risky environment. Do you have manufacturing in the US? Do you have manufacturing in Europe? Do you have manufacturing in Asia? Or is it a centralized location where you can only do it in one spot? Those are all questions that pharma asks. I mean, if I'm sitting in pharma's seat and I've got a drug that's going to be, either a rare disease that's very critical for patients, or if I'm dealing with a drug asset that deals with millions of patients, but really critical for people's health, I'm asking the question, how do I ensure every patient gets their medicine as reliably as possible, in spite of any geopolitical or supply chain risks that exist? And so what I'm seeing is, I think on the device side, we're seeing two buckets, which is supplier standardization. So standard device, and it works for everybody. Or some pharmaceutical companies are developing their own devices and they're standardizing the platform internally. So they've developed the intercompany standardized platform. And I think we're seeing that a little bit more. I'm seeing it pockets now on the drug containment solutions as well. On the glass side of, some pharma are okay with standard platform type of products. Some customers now are looking at standardizing their own custom platform. So while it's unique to a supplier, let's say, it's not for that pharma company. They're putting every asset into it and standardizing that platform across. So it's an interesting, a balanced trade-off risk profile for each one of those. I think it depends on the long-term strategic view of a set of assets or a pipeline for a pharma. How much do they want to invest in that, specific standardized asset for themselves versus spending a little bit less up front, but then having maybe a standardized platform that everybody else uses too. I think it's to your question also, where do you where do you invest? Up front, or is it a little bit more downstream? And those are questions and investment decisions I see pharma companies taking totally different paths. I'm very curious to see where it all ends.
I mean, it's about trade-offs, right? At the end of the day, to your point, right? If you standardize, you may be able to de-risk a little bit up front, and that might save you time on the back end in terms of future assets.
Right.
But if you were to take I need to get this to market as fast as possible, you may make some, what I'm going to say, shortcuts, which might end up leading to more downstream or later. So, well, I guess with that, Nathan, what I'd like to do before we close this conversation is ask you one final question. And, we ask this of all of our guests on this show, and it's essentially, if someone's getting into the combinations product space from the device side, like you did, a handful of years ago, what's one thing you would tell them now so that they could take that with them?
It's an incredibly rewarding space. What you do every day impacts patients, maybe not right away, but will eventually impact patients at some point in the future. There will be somebody's kid, somebody's daughter, somebody's brother, mother, father using that device or using that system, and it will change. It will be life-changing for them. And I'd say, in spite of the challenges, the nuances, the layoffs and things that happen in careers, if this is a space you want to be a part of, just know that you're having a positive impact on people and patients. You're making a difference in people's lives. You're a little further away from it, but what you do every day helps people. And I think that, to me, has always motivated me to be in the space. I really love it. I love the level of technical expertise, the science, the brilliant scientific brains behind some of these things, the engineering genius behind some of these devices, the engineering genius behind the manufacturing and the scale of this stuff. I mean, if you've been to one of these CDMOs or some in-house manufacturing, it's extraordinary. So much fun. It's better than any How It's Made episode I've ever seen. And while being technically very interesting, it's also helping people, which to me is the best part. So that's, if I were telling somebody entering this, I would encourage them to go into the space, because it's so rewarding.
I will confidently say I echo everything you said. I would say that Jonathan is in the same boat based on all the conversations we've had. With that, I think I don't want to end on any other note. And thank you for all the time that you spent and all the insights you shared with us and those that are going to listen to this podcast. So Nathan, thank you for being on. It's been awesome having you today.
Thanks, Parth. Hey, Jonathan, it's been amazing. Thanks for your time, and thanks for having me on. It's been great.